You're starting in games today.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to be talking about video games, specifically Battle for Azeroth, which is the latest expansion for World of Warcraft. So, yeah, let's jump right into it. What's been your experience with the expansion so far? It came out, what, a week ago? 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, no, it's been 2 weeks because,
2 weeks, yeah.
well, yeah, pretty much almost exactly. Two weeks and 2 days. So, I guess just for a
Nice.
little bit of background, so I started playing World of Warcraft in, I believe, 2007, like the very, very end of 2007, because I remember the Christmas event, um, like right before 2008, basically. Um, So yeah, I mean basically Wrath of the Lich King, or right when it was coming out. Um,
Yeah.
or hang on, maybe that was 2008 to 2000. In any case, I've been playing World of War. I mean, we've both been playing World of Warcraft for about 10 years. I've kind of jumped. I played pretty solidly up until Mists of Pandaria, and then kind of started taking breaks each expansion. So I don't really come back at the beginning of the expansion, then a couple patches in, take a leave for another year, wait for the next expansion to come out. So in any case, I've had a lot of experience of World of Warcraft. I think my slash played time over all my main characters is adds up to something over like 13,000, 14,000 hours, which is absolutely
Wow.
insane. Um, yeah. No, I mean, if you go off, people always say you're an expert at something after 10,000 hours. And, I mean, I think it's a good. Obviously, you can't really define expertness just by an arbitrary value in
Yeah.
hours like that. But, I mean, it just goes to show that I've played a lot of World of Warcraft. Probably that's the single activity that I've spent the most amount of time in my life doing,
Wow.
other than just existing and breathing and stuff like that. So for most of WoW, I've been very hardcore about it. I led a raiding guild for many years. I mean, I've led multiple raiding guilds, but I had a hardcore raiding guild that you were part of for a little while, but we actually managed to get up to briefly number one on our server and number one on the Horde side, so number two on the server overall for well over a year. So fairly successful. I guess I should put a disclaimer. Our server wasn't the best server in terms of ranking, but I am still. I was like 16 when I made the guild, so I'm pretty
All right.
proud that I, got that group of ruffians together and managed to, work our way up to number one on the server. So I'm a little, I'm hardcore with the game, and it's really hard to not be hardcore. So how I'm going to describe my experiences with the expansion, you've got to kind of look at it through the lens of somebody who's a little bit hardcore. And obviously, we're only 2 weeks into the expansion right now. On Tuesday, the first raid is going to come out, as well as the Mythic Plus dungeon. So the more hardcore content isn't even out in the game yet. But that said, my experience, it's been a good expansion, for sure. So the story of this expansion is actually really fun. I'm not the type of person who goes and reads quest text, but I pay attention to. I kind of have a general idea of what's going on. I watch all the cinematics, all that kind of stuff. Um, and yeah, it's just fun. I am a bit of a like Warcraft. It feels like Warcraft is kind of going, at the root of it is very alliance versus horde. It's got war in the name. So I do like that the game is kind of going back to its roots a little bit. That that's fantastic. I have always liked, I've never been a huge PvPer, but I've always enjoyed PvP. I don't know, I just like that aspect of it. So it's been a good story so far. Both the Alliance and the small bit of the Alliance I've seen has been really great so far. Um, you know, it, they are doing a pretty good job of actually also like kind of telling the story through quests these days, and I guess for the most part in WoW they always kind of have, but um, I like all the thing. There are more cutscenes these days and more. what people would just call role playing with the NPCs and all that kind of stuff.
For sure.
So, starting just with the leveling experience, because obviously that's the first thing I kind of came in and had an experience with. It it seems like overall is very, very similar to Legion. I do like the part where Blizzard seems to have kind of got the idea that the game really starts at max level. That's what Blizzard and World of Warcraft are really good at. Their actual quests are not. There are some quests that have kind of progressed from the days of just kill things, gather things on the ground, pick up things from mobs, but overall not really. So I do like the fact that compared to something like going 70 to 80 in Northrend and Wrath of the Lich King, or 80 to 85 in Cataclysm, you kind of fly through the questing experience from 110 to 120. And I like that. There are actually a lot of the quest chains that happen at max level, and that just feels a lot better since you spend so much time to actually get those quest chains done, and also so much more of the interesting content is at max level. But that said, honestly, in my opinion, they didn't do a great job with just creativity in the quests. The story of them is great and everything, but I kind of feel like the system of questing they have now does not work as much. I feel like they need more kind of scenarios and I don't know, more integration with dungeons and more things that kind of get you to group up, not just click a button, open the group finder, click another button to join the group, kill a thing, and then immediately jump out of your group. There's no rewards for really grouping with people. But that all said, the game really is at max level, and the max level experience has been pretty good again. I mean, you have the same thing back in Legion where you have the world quests and the rep grinds, and it does get grindy after a while, but yeah, so far it's been pretty fun. So before I get too far ahead, just because I want to start hearing some of your thoughts, so we can kind of go back and forth a bit here. What is your experience kind of with, just, I guess, leveling and stuff and the quests and story?
Right. Well, yeah, so I pretty much approach the game from an opposite perspective as you. Yeah, for me, I mean, this is video games in general, mostly, including World of Warcraft. So I pretty much play games for the story and for the experience.
Mm-hmm.
I don't normally go so far as role-playing, but yeah, just for the story and just the feeling of being in the world. Sorry about the... Yeah, sorry, there was some noise there. Yeah. Yeah, so I read all the quest text. If you don't, for me, I kind of don't even understand why you're playing the game, because it's I don't know. It's... you're just doing the motions without actually having any idea why. And yeah, I mean, sorry. Yeah. Anyway, so that's my approach. Obviously, you say, and a lot of people do share this. Sorry. Yeah, so a lot of people share the opinion that the game starts at max level. For me, and a lot of expansion at least have kind of ended at max level. The point of the game is the leveling and going through the story, and then once you get to that point, rep grinds and stuff would have cool story attached to them, so I do those, but mostly at that point it's that's when it's time to make a new character and do it again. Like you said, I briefly did some high level raiding with you, and that was kind of fun, but I don't know, definitely something I would get tired of a lot faster. Yeah, and I've never been to the hardcore elements of min-maxing or I know that all the characters have stats on their character sheet, and higher stats is better, but I don't even know what each stat actually does in gameplay terms. So yeah, I'm definitely a lot more in it for the story and stuff like that. So it is actually interesting. Like, I'm glad to hear that there is a lot more story and quest chains and stuff like that at max level, because on the character I'm playing, I'm still only level 115, but I feel like I've got there like way too fast, and I was kind of getting anxious. Like, oh, is like, am I already halfway through the story content of this expansion? Like,
Hmm.
I've just been playing because I've been busy since the expansion, so I haven't played the new content too much. So it's like in a short time I've been playing, I'm already halfway through the content. Like, so yeah, I was getting really anxious about that, but I'm glad to hear that it continues at higher levels. Um, yeah. So that said, like, I'm loving this expansion from that sense because there is so much story and it is so dense, and there's all these new places to explore. Um, so I normally am a horde player, and like this expansion obviously is pitting the two factions very much against each other, which makes me, want to have horde pride more than ever. But ironically, I'm actually playing an alliance character right now, just because a while back I started playing with my girlfriend who's never played World of Warcraft and very many video games in general. So we created new characters and we've been leveling through. We're only like level 50 or something on those. Um, and the plan was to save all the new story until I could play through it with her. Like, I wouldn't even touch Battle for Azeroth until we got up to max level. But then, she's even busier than I am with work and school, and she's in university and all that. So, uh, yeah, so it was looking like, it would be like the next expansion might be out before I even got to try Battle for Azeroth. So I kind of decided, because I consider the Horde storyline the quote real storyline, I'll save that side for when I play with her and then play through the Alliance on my own. And, even though I much prefer the Horde, like the Alliance, it has been insanely fun and I am loving the story and I love the locations. Drustvar is definitely one of my favorite zones they've done in the game. It kind of is a blatant ripoff of The Witcher 3, but since the Witcher series are my favorite games, like, I'm totally okay with that. Um, yeah, and I've done like a little. I've done the introductory stuff on the Horde side, and that is so much fun. And I love, like, obviously I live in Mexico, so I love the whole, like, all the references to the ancient Mesoamerican cultures that are baked into that zone. And yeah, I also love dinosaurs, so I'm expecting to have like even more, like twice as much fun when I finally get to the Horde side. So, yeah, that's been my experience with the leveling so far. Like I said, I'm only 115, so I have less experience than you.
Right.
Uh, yeah, you said you had more to say after that, after I gave my
Yeah,
perspective.
I mean, obviously I'm at max level and I've been playing around at max level doing all those extra things. There are some new additions to the game. One being actually a couple things that I'm pretty excited for. So we have the island expeditions, which are a new kind of scenario type deal, but in these, you're in a group of three people, so you can either bring a group of three, or you actually have to bring a group of three for the PvP or the highest level, like the highest difficulty of these. So you bring a group of three, you sail off to an island, and then it's just a race to collect resources. But so it's a race with, since I've been playing Horde, it's been a race with the Alliance. So on most of the difficulties, or there's a PvE version and a PvP version. So the PvE version, you are racing against NPC Alliance players, and you can fight them and kill them. It's actually interesting because they are mobs that are programmed to be very, similar to a class, just an AI that's similar to an Alliance player that you would face. So
Right. Yeah, they talked a lot about that at BlizzCon. I know you haven't been watching BlizzCons lately, but it did make me very excited. And like, so I've yet to experience the island expeditions and know how well they did in that specifically, but I am super excited just going forward in Warcraft, like how they can implement this more advanced AI.
Yeah,
And
for sure. So, I mean, it's funny because my first experience, I'd gone into this kind of blind, not really knowing what it is, just with a group of my friends, and there's just a gnome mage just jumping around, like spamming arcane blast, and I had I thought it was a player. Like I had no idea that it wasn't a player. So, they do. Once you kind of know to look out for stuff, especially on the lowest difficulty, when it's pretty obvious they program them to not be very difficult. You can kind of spot that they're not a player, but it's just kind of cool. It's a thing that's never been there, and the island, the gameplay of the island expedition is kind of fun too. Like, so far our strategy that we've used is just to run 3 DPS, but that means you have to kind of, your survivability is kind of on your shoulders. You got to be survivable. You got to kill things fast. I don't really know what the strategies are for the highest level difficulty, but it's something that can be a little bit more challenging. I really like the thing they've been doing recently, like with the Mythic Plus, where they have very, very challenging content that isn't necessary. It's not necessary to have a full raid group of 10 to 25 people, because raiding is great. Raiding is like one of my favorite things to do, like, ever in life. But the time investment and just the logistics of getting everybody together makes it so that you can only really do it a couple nights a week, and only if you found a group of people. So yeah, I'm actually pretty psyched for the island expeditions. There are only 3 of them, and they're fun so far. They have some replayability, but once you kind of figured out how to beat them, not a ton. But it's definitely, like, it's a new thing. You have, like, if you do a few of them each week, you get rewarded for it. So I can see it being something that I won't get super tired of, even if I'm doing it week after week, just a few of them. And who knows what they'll do with that idea in the future. So that's something that's been great. They have the Warfronts coming out, which haven't been released but look super cool. Obviously, it's kind of like an RTS 20 versus 20 thing in WoW, but it also kind of has, like, as I understand it, people, the Horde or Alliance, can be holding a thing that gives you, it kind of like, I don't know if you remember Winter Grasp in Wrath of the Lich King, but that was kind of fun in that if you wanted to actually go and do your weekly raid, like, they had a raid in Winter Grasp, which just dropped some, it just had a couple easy bosses. It was kind of the same thing as, like, Tolbarad or Tolbarad?
Right.
Yeah, in Cataclysm.
To clarify, the difference here is that Warfronts are PvE. Like, only one side is players and the other side is NPCs.
But it's still kind of the thing where you have the factions, like, fighting for something back and forth. Yeah. It's really cool because it kind of... One thing that I've really been not liking about WoW recently is server, they are kind of making mega servers, and they have the load balancing thing where, people be put on different servers. The server community is almost just, like, dead now. Other than the fact I am on an RP server, when the Wormrest Accord used to be, like, the premier, or one of the premier RP servers, along with Moonguard, and it's still a destination for people who roleplay, but I can just tell, with all this server changes, it's really obvious how much the server community has suffered. And some things like Wintergrass or Tolbarad or these Warfronts are something where if you want to actually, like, do your raid or get your items or whatever, you need to, be yelling in trade chat, like, hey guys, it's like 30 minutes till Wintergrass or whatever. Sometimes you just get a group of friends or get everybody in your guild to jump in and just take it back because, hey, you want to do your raid. And so since Warfronts aren't out yet, I don't do a ton of looking into things ahead of time. Like, even though I'm a hardcore raider, I don't even really, until it's like a week until the raid or a few days, I don't really, like, look really into it and try to get all the strats and everything, because I like, having a little bit of a surprise. So I haven't looked into Warfronts too much, but as I understand, like, there are going to be consequences to, like, losing your hold on the Warfronts. I don't know if it's vendors that sell items or what. It might not be something super important, but still a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I think it was mostly world quests. Like, you have world quests when you're...
Well, that's even more important. Like...
Right.
Yeah.
I guess the thing, so it sounds like you might be disappointed in this, because I I can't remember exactly what the system is for it, but it's basically built into it that like it's basically going to switch back and forth every few days.
No. But
It's something that
is it guaranteed to, but you might get it sooner possibly, or
I think something like that. I can't. It might be something like one side gets a buff or whatever. I can't
'cause
remember
that's
exactly
the same
how.
that's the same way Wintergraphs worked, and
Yeah.
that was great because yeah, somebody couldn't hold it for like, but there were certain circumstances where like it got super ridiculous. Like, the opposite alliance side would be doing like 2,000% extra damage because the horde had managed to hold on so long. But for the most part, it's a good way to kind of make it so. And that's the thing. If one side is going really well, the mechanism that kind of prevents from somebody from holding on to it for a long time can cause it to switch over, but it might also switch back really fast.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know. Again, I'll have to see, but it still seems like something that's going to be cool overall. I mean, regardless, just RTS like steel inside World of Warcraft just sounds cool.
Yeah. No, I am
So
really excited for that. And kind of story wise, I mean, this is a thing that switches back and forth. I don't think it will have a ton of actually like advancing the story, but at least what it represents for the story.
yeah,
I know there were like they'd announced two, but only one is coming out right now. Is that right? Um,
the only one's coming out, and I can't remember. It's like
yeah. So it's like the Plaguelands one, right? Or it's basically like
no,
I can't or Arathi. I think Arathi Highlands, right? It's
yeah,
Arathi Highlands, and it's the idea is like after they've got Undercity, now the Alliance is marching on Silvermoon. So
mm,
it's basically the last, like it is the last bastion of the Horde in the Eastern Kingdoms. So like I said, because it will be switching back and forth in game terms, it's not really advancing that story, but at least it's representative of like, hey, we're all over here questing on Kulturas and Zandalar, but like the Horde and Alliance are still fighting in this battleground um, over Silvermoon, basically, and whether the Horde is going to continue to have any presence left on.
yeah. So
Um, and I don't know if they announced a specific one, but I think they said there should be a similar thing in Kalimdor, like with the Draenei, but
hmm.
I'm not too clear on that.
No. So the other thing, I mean, so I just checked it out. So Arathi Highlands is going to open first, and then Battle for Stromgarde. So
Uh,
the cool thing, and this was the other thing. So I guess the alliance starts with Arathi Highlands, and Horde has to challenge them. But you have to contribute profession items, gold, war resources to help your faction
right.
build up and attack. And it says this is a region-wide effort. So this kind
Yeah.
of harkens back to the days of like I don't know if you've read much about the Anchorage
Mhm.
event,
Yeah, I'm
like the
familiar.
war effort. And like holy crap, that's just it's one of the most epic moments in like there was a lot of issues with it just because of like massive player loads, but just the whole like
Server, like, yeah.
scepter of the shifting sands quest chain, having the few people that would go through and their guilds would be helping them, and then everybody would gather while they ring the gong and crazy stuff happens, and just stuff like that. So this shows that although this isn't server wide, this is region wide. So I guess you have millions of players kind of working
Yeah,
towards it.
that's.
Um,
So I'm surprised by that. I thought you were actually going to react really negative to that because community, but this is like, since this is a cross regions, it doesn't matter as much if anyone on your server
no, I
contributes.
mean it doesn't really matter, but it's still something like I like dynamic events like this where like the actual progression of it is not set in stone. Like it depends
Mhm.
on the players, banding together and doing something. It's a step in the right direction. Like sure, this seems like a more token thing kind of at this point. Although maybe, and I'm sure there'll be like rep rewards for the turn-ins and stuff. Um, so people will have incentive to
Yeah,
do it. But I mean, it's still a step in the right direction in my opinion. Um,
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
I guess it is kind of a problem of them not being able to please everyone. So there are people like you who are more hardcore, and like you probably would get a lot out of, say, the Scepter of the Shifting Sands quest line. For me, someone who plays at their own pace and very much likes to go slowly through the game, just like, there will be times like my whole first day in Battle for Azeroth was like after I did the initial scenario, I got to Zoldazar, and I was literally just walking around Zoldazar, exploring,
Yeah.
and not even doing any quests. So for people like me who like to take their time and enjoy the story, ironically, I would be missing out on a lot of the story because even if I had been playing at the times, I'd never would have experienced any of the Scepter of the Shifting Sand stuff because I'd just be going
So
at my leisurely pace, and everyone else would finish it before I had a chance to see it.
yeah, I guess my problem with that though is this isn't a single player game. This is a this is a multiplayer game, and that's the whole point for me is doing stuff with other people. Like, and it's one of the reasons I really don't, pay too much attention to the quests and stuff. This game just isn't built to be really great at that. If I'm going to play a game that has a story, like things like the Bioshock games, they have a story. I get really into the story because it's a single player game and that's what the game is all about. And kind of they don't have quests or anything because the whole story is integrated into the game really well. And World of Warcraft just isn't beyond scenario. Like scenarios are really good for that. I really like scenarios and I like when they can put that in. But in the just regular questing system, that's just not. It's just not what the game is built for, and it's fine. Obviously fine to enjoy that, but kind of the deal is, in a situation like this, the whole point is not everybody is going to be able to experience everything, and there should be rewards for people who like the working towards something and achieving something is a big part of what makes the game fun. And it just because there is something where you have to work towards it to experience it doesn't, there's so much in WoW that happens anyway that you're not going to make it through all of it no matter how hard you try. So it's not really a big deal if there's stuff that you might not jive with your playstyle, because that's been a kind of a thing for player. It's one of the big reasons Raid Finder was kind of put into the game, because people who didn't have the time to raid, would complain that they wouldn't be able to see the raid bosses. And yeah, fair enough. Like, I'm not like some people, and I don't think, the Raid Finder is a big deal. They're not putting in the work to get it. I do think it could have been implemented a little better, so things are at least a little bit of challenge, but you could still jump into it. Like, I think it might have been better if you had smaller groups and slightly harder. But as it is, perfectly fine. But obviously Blizzard is catering to multiple different demographics. Like, I think it would be really stupid for some, there to be some pet battle mount reward that required you to go really hard into it, and everybody would complain that, oh, you can't get that without doing pet battle, so they put a pet battle raid finder in, or some equivalent to pet battles that the raid finder is equivalent to. Blizzard is doing a good enough job at covering all of their bases that I don't think they should be held back from doing huge epic events that might not everybody would necessarily get to partake in, just because they're worried about casual people not seeing it.
I guess it kind of, I don't know. So it always seems like the whole community thing always goes together with, it's assumed that like community also means hardcore or like super fast paced. Like,
well, I don't think
like I do love playing with, like, for example, the best experiences I've had is originally when we started playing and we were questing together, or when I'm playing with my girlfriend Vanessa now. We are going at a super leisurely pace, but we're still playing together. Like, we're having a multiplayer experience going through these story quests. So, yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You have those, and if something like the Scepter of the Shifting Sands question got added in, you would still have those.
Right.
But I mean, that's the other thing. Like, the whole like war effort thing for Anchorage took months in some cases. So it's not like this was a thing that just happened and was gone. And you only have a couple years per expansion, and you already have all this content that you're never going to really get through. So yeah.
Right. I guess I don't know. And I'm sort of still trying to work this out in my head, but it's the idea that it always seems like when people talk about things that foster community, they always are also things that only the most hardcore get to experience. So is that like,
I
is
don't
there
think
something
that's
intrinsically linked about
true.
that, or?
No, well, I don't think that's true though, because the war effort, for the most part, that was something that everybody could be contributing to. And the thing with the Scepter of the Shifting Sands is, you only a few people would actually get the scepter and ring the gong, but it would be a guild effort to get those people through that. So
Right.
you might be able to help by joining up in a raid group and going and helping them down a boss or whatever. It doesn't it doesn't require anything that's super hardcore or a huge effort. Like, you might just be jumping in. And then you have all the turning in resources and all, there is obviously a lot of world PvP that went along with that, and just a whole bunch of other stuff. Like there were, quests and just some daily type things, and just a whole bunch of stuff that went along with it. It was just this one quest chain that one person would go through, or anybody could go through, but normally a guild would come together and help somebody get through. And that's kind of the thing when you are fostering community. Like, I mean, there are a whole bunch of things that foster community. Like back when heroic dungeons didn't have a group finder, people would group up with people and go and do a dungeon. Sometimes that would be the end of it. But sometimes, if you enjoyed your experience with somebody, you'd add them as a friend, and then whenever you guys were logging online, you'd just go do heroic dungeons with each other. And they were never really hard. They didn't take a super long amount of time. But that's the kind of thing that we talk about when we're talking about fostering community. And that's the thing. It needs to be something, because as the game is now, there's no incentive for you to group up with other people and do things, because everything can be, not everything obviously, but most of the game can either be completed by yourself or by just using the looking for group tool to jump into a group for the 2 minutes it takes to kill a mob or a couple mobs or a boss, and then jump right out of it. So by having something that requires more effort, that just by itself requires people to actually group up and stay in contact with each other longer. So I think there is a little bit of a link. Like,
Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I was thinking. Like, I can definitely see how, oh, the way to foster community is to make things really difficult so that you need a community to get through it.
and it's not
It's,
necessarily
I
really
guess,
difficult. It can just
yeah,
mean needing more than one person to actually accomplish a task.
right.
Like, back in vanilla WoW, there are just a lot of quests that required a couple people just because the mobs were elite. And so you'd have people
Mhm.
looking, you'd be in a zone, you'd have other people leveling in your zone. You just say in general chat, hey, anybody want to group up and get this quest done? And then, maybe they're in a guild or something. There is a lot more time to just, like, you might be drinking or something, after you've killed a bunch of stuff. You're drinking and eating, and that would be time where you could talk. There's traveling.
Right.
And now you just kind of, you teleport everywhere. Your resources, just accumulate super fast. So there's no downtime in the game anymore, really. Um, so I think
Mm.
there's just a bunch of different things that kind of have ended up in the situation we are. But I guess really,
I guess it is, I don't know, maybe it just has something to do with that. Obviously, World of Warcraft caters to nerds, and not to make too much stereotypes, but nerds in general are more socially awkward people. Like, I guess it's interesting that people always talk about like, oh, the way to foster community is they need to force us to have community. Like, you can group up with people anytime you want, but the idea, even among people who want that, seems to be, well, we won't unless they force us to. So
yeah.
it's like, it's
Well,
kind of like when you have like, I don't know, a new class, and on the first day, the teacher assigns you all to groups so that you get to know each other.
there was a big problem up until just the recent expansions where grouping up actually hindered you, was the issue.
Really, I know
Yeah,
that.
I know. Questing was a terrible experience with more than like two people,
Huh.
for the longest time. They've kind of fixed that issue, but yeah, I mean, probably basically all through from like Wrath of the Lich King to Warlords of Draenor, it was just not. I mean, even Legion had some issues with grouping up. It was just it negatively affected your progression. So you could do it if
Mhm.
but I mean that's the other thing too is, with all these like load balancing systems and realm amalgamation and all of that, you're just not. That's the other thing. Before, with your server communities, you would see the same people often. You'd be coming in contact with the same people over and over again. And at some point, it just kind of makes sense to put them on your friends list or whatever if you're kind of coming in contact. And now, I hardly ever see the same person twice if I'm grouping up
Right.
to do something. So yeah, it just there's that barrier to it too. And I mean, yeah, I think when maybe it does say something that we need to be forced to group up, but I enjoyed it way back when, because that's the other thing. If we're not forced to group up, then there's a lot of people who will just kind of put their head down and never talk to anybody else in the game. Maybe they're just shy. But, that kind of forcing or having to group up to do things. I mean, first, like, I think having things where you have to group up with other players to do something, like, you shouldn't avoid that. Like, even if it does feel like you're forcing people together, like, there should just be a fair amount of content. I think there should be a lot of content outside of just specific raid dungeons where it would be nice to group up with people. No matter what the reasons are. Like, it just seems like it's more epic when you're in a group taking down a big monster, even if you're not talking to the other people.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, I guess a lot of, like, I don't know, I'm a bad, not sample size, but you know what I mean. I'm maybe a bad person to talk to this because I think I am so unique when it comes to people who play Warcraft, and that, like, I love playing it as a multiplayer game. I love playing with other people, but I prefer, like, my favorite times have been when I'm playing with people I know in real life, which kind of defeats the purpose of an MMO. The point is you, like, connect with people all over the world, and for a lot of people, I think it's that they either don't necessarily like hanging out with people in real life or don't know a lot of people in real life, so they want to connect on the internet, where for me, I'm like, I'm fine with that content, but, like, I'd be playing with my girlfriend and you and friends I know in real life.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there definitely are people like that, but yeah, I mean, I come to the game because I would really like to meet other people. I mean, it's great because you're getting to play a game and you're meeting cool people. Like, obviously some of the friends I have, my oldest friends at this point have come from World of Warcraft, and there are people I've, like, met in real life multiple times. So
I guess it is weird that, like, I'm obviously not at all the graphic for the game, but I still love it. So at least it has a wide appeal. But yeah, and I guess I'm not even opposed to, like, playing with people I meet online. I guess a thing for me, dungeons are a good example of a place where, like, even when I'm playing with my girlfriend, we're still forced to group up with 3 other random people, and it's like, I guess this is a unique problem for me just because I play the game so differently than other people. Like I said, I like to read all the quest text, but dungeons are the one place where I basically never get to read the quest text that gives a lot of context to the story of what's going on in there, because I'm grouped up with 3 other random people who are just going to immediately accept the quest and go and start killing things, and are going to kick me out of the group if I stand there reading the quest text. So
low-level dungeons, I don't think they will kick you out because nobody cares about low-level dungeons.
Really? No, I don't know. I guess I've seen people get really, like, they not even taking them seriously. Just people get, I guess it's people who have, like, leveled through them 1,000 times already and are just done with them. But, like, people get really toxic in low-level dungeons sometimes.
No, I think the other thing is you just have to talk to people too and be willing to just, like, say, I think the other thing too is if you just are the tank, then, or the healer, then, there's not really anything anybody can say. But I mean, that's kind of neither here nor there. The higher level dungeons, you get the quests outside the dungeons now. So that problem's kind of gone. But yeah, I mean, so a dungeon, I think dungeons just aren't really, they are for multiple people, and it's kind of, again, like, the entire game can't be doable for a single player, or else it wouldn't, that would defeat the entire purpose of an MMO. I think you really have, if you're playing WoW, which is an MMO, and I mean, there's also many things. There are many things that have kind of led to its decline. Like, at its peak, WoW had 13.5 million people, and now it's below 5 million.
Right. Although ironically, Battle for Azeroth was their fastest selling expansion ever. So I'm not even sure how those numbers worked out.
Yeah,
But
I mean, it might be fast. They have definitely not sold any, they haven't even sold half as much as their best selling expansion, though.
right.
Um, so I'm not really sure where they are probably using some metric which just ends up with fastest so they can,
Right.
advertise. Um, but, a lot of the decline started happening when these changes that led it, stop grouping up just kind of died really in Cataclysm, especially with Raid Finder, and that's when the game started losing subscribers because that I don't know, and maybe I think there are other things that happen there, like I think the MMO bubble just kind of burst at that point.
Right. That's I was gonna say that like the reason why MMOs have become less popular is like a whole other conversation with a lot of theories around it that we can talk
Yeah.
about. But yeah, you do have an interesting take on it, though.
Yeah, I mean there is, so obviously that's the lack of grouping isn't the only reason for the decline of WoW, but I mean that's the other thing. MMOs in general kind of moved, like even Rift had this dungeon finder. I think Rift is the only. How no, I played a couple of other MMOs and all of them started having this dungeon finder type experience where it was very easy to just kind of, you didn't really have to group with people. You just have it kind of go through. The content would sort of be served to you. So I think it might have just been a change in MMOs just as a whole to kind of cater to a more casual player. And of
Right.
course, the market did change. Like people,
Yeah,
I think people
I do
just
think
had
a
their
lot of it.
fill of. Sorry.
Well, it's interesting because, and next up in your segment, we're going to be talking about attention, which is a theory I've heard a lot about why MMOs are declining. It's just that, the whole shorter attention span thing, where like
Yeah.
the games that are most popular right now are the games where you aim at a match and then
Mm-hmm.
stop. So,
Yeah, and I think just the player base kind of grew up, and they're working jobs now, and maybe they're not being as many people are funneling into it as used to, and there's a whole bunch of reasons, but I do think WoW definitely suffered for a lot of people. I mean, you can just look at the number of people playing some version of classic Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King, like private servers, is like millions at this point. I think it's like between 1.5 and 2 million. It's just like almost half the amount of subscribers that like WoW itself has. So, and these are all people who have figured out how to go and are willing to break the terms of service and can actually figure out how to download a separate client and change a file to point to different servers. And so I'm pretty confident that the number would probably double if it was made more accessible. And at that point, you're just getting crazy. So I think that does go to show that some people don't like how WoW is these days. So anyway, the whole point of this long kind of rant was just that I am glad to see things that do have players working together in some capacity, even if right now it is, world or region wide. I guess millions of people working together to do the same thing. At least it shows that at some point they said they would never do any, or they had no plans to do any sort of war effort type, anchorage type thing again, just because of server architecture issues. They just thought that whole event was too, what's the word? Too big or grand. What's the word for like? I don't know.
I don't know. Ironically, now they can because of the thing you don't like, which is the whole server shard, being able to disperse server load.
Yeah, I mean that's not even necessary. It's more just like because no matter what, if there was something like the gong being rung, everybody would end up. It's either the servers are just distributed in a way so that it's individual to server or specific shards, in which case everybody's going to end up there on that individual one, or it's going to be something that happens all at once and the entire population's going to end up there. You can still kind of have those issues, so it's still something they have to work around. And yeah, I don't think they'd have some sort of thing where, it probably wouldn't be the same as Anchorage, where once the gong is rung, there's a 10-hour window where anybody else who has the scepter can ring the gong, and then that's it. Because if it was with the whole world, then it leaves open a lot more things. Like maybe somebody figure out some way to get it super fast beyond everybody else, and then,
Yeah.
there are thousands of people who looked like they were going to. There's just it probably wouldn't be the same, but this is them showing their willingness to kind of look at how can we do things that are, more along those lines, have people coming together and working together. So yeah, I'm excited to see where that whole line of thought goes.
For sure.
Um,
Yeah, so I guess tying it a little bit more to the expansion at hand, um, something I've loved, and I knew I was going to love it, but I think I've ended up loving it even a lot more than I thought, is like the reintroduction of world PvP with war mode. I think war mode is one of the best things they've ever done to the game. And it's actually had like a lot more, like I said, I usually play by myself at my own pace, but actually the times I have been playing with other players a lot during this expansion is war mode, because it's like you'll be going along and questing, and then someone from the other side will attack you, and then a couple people from your side will come to like defend, and then a couple more people from the other side. So you'll end up just like, because you have to, you'll end up forming these teams to fight against enemy teams just out in the world. And yeah,
yeah,
I don't know. I've always enjoyed PvP, and there's just something when, because you are playing against other players, there's just like this exhilaration that comes out of it that, like, even though I play the game for the story and I love the story, like nothing really compares to that rush, I guess.
mhm.
And now that they've integrated it into the game, and I actually am like, battlegrounds are fun, but when you're actually playing through the content in the world and part of the story is this alliance horde conflict, and then you're actually fighting other players from the other side,
Yeah.
it's just all beautifully linked together for
No,
me. So.
I do definitely like war mode. I mean, I don't play on it a lot just because I kind of have things to do.
Yeah.
Or, I have set out my goals, and in my opinion, the rewards for PvP it just doesn't feel good anymore. Like, it doesn't really feel like just the way they have the
I
PvP scaling set up and everything.
I honestly don't even know what the
Doesn't.
rewards are. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
other
it's
than you have
definitely
10% experience for playing with war mode on, but like I don't.
I
For me,
mean,
it's not about the rewards. For me, it's just fun.
the actual loot and stuff. And yeah, I'm a little bit more. I like battlegrounds. I think more.
Although there are
Um,
those like some of the best gear I have has come out of those war chests. So
yeah, I think that's a situation that's pretty unique to leveling. Um, in any case, so for PvP, like I enjoy battlegrounds a lot. I do kind of enjoy world PvP, but this kind of comes back to again the community thing again for me. I really like about PvP, or what I really liked about PvP, were the stories that would come out. So you would have your server. I mean, there isn't any story exactly in PvP. You're just, I mean, other than the Alliance Horde story, you're fighting. But what I really liked back on, my server is you'd have those players who are or infinite miss, or you'd have people, the world PvP RP was fantastic. Like it was amazing. You'd have people who were RPing as like the defenders of people and going and protecting lobies who are questing or whatever, or you'd have people putting out bounties on people, and now you never see the same person like
well,
twice
yeah.
anymore. I mean, you might because
When
they
you play
come
in
back
RP
and
realms, at least the shards are way smaller, so maybe
yeah.
it's not as small, but
No,
yeah.
it's nowhere near as small as a realm like it used to be, and so you'll kind of you might see the same person hanging out in an area for a while. They might camp you for a while. At some point, though, you just never kind of see that person again. You don't have the same like forum posts like I don't know. You just have like back and forth on the forums. You'd like people would know people. That was the part that was really fun about the world PvP to me. If I'm just kind of going and PvPing for the sake of PvPing, I just kind of like battlegrounds because I like objective gaming. Basically, it's kind of like the reason I really like Counter Strike, and I don't play death matches in
Right.
Counter-Strike is I like the, planting the bomb, defusing the bomb, the back and forth kind of thing there. Just, dueling or whatever is fun, and it can be really fun when you have those big raids, or like, actually going and I don't even know if you can. I mean, I guess you can go like kill faction leaders and stuff
Right.
now still, but you just don't see that happening anywhere near as often as it used to. And maybe I don't know if that's again a thing where realms are spread out, so you don't have people plotting and planning to just make groups at certain times, or if it's just hard. I think it got harder with the rework in Cataclysm to do a lot of the cities. Um, but yeah, I do enjoy the thing where you end up in just a big group of like 30 versus 30, and it's a big war zone type deal. Like, I do like that in World PvP. Um, and I have seen stuff like that happen sometimes in war mode. Um, so yeah, no, I definitely think war mode, for the time as it is now, like, I think the old version of World PvP is just unfortunately kind of dead. And I think there might be ways to. Well, I mean, again, you kind of have the issue where, you know, you just have the shards and everything. But maybe in the future they might have something where they have, like I don't know. I think having things like Winter Grasp or Tolbarad or Ashran, like Ashran was, it was a failure. I think most people would say, but I do like that kind of thing where you always end up with a group of people who's kind of at the core, always doing that, always like leading those raid groups of people. And maybe they can go back to something like that for people who like those more like storyline based world PvP type things. But since world, especially with for a long time, flying had kind of really killed world PvP.
That's the other thing I was gonna say. There's always like, I don't know. So people hate that they don't let you fly immediately in expansions anymore. I mean, I've always kind of been on the side of the devs to begin with, that I'm like, no, like it is more fun leveling when you get to experience it on the ground the first
Yeah.
time. But especially with world PvP, I'm like so glad that they went that route now, because when like it was a lot of fun when they first introduced the Dark Shore stuff, and I was playing through that, and there were like hundreds, like 100 people on each side just killing each other. But that was a fun introduction to war mode. But the one thing that killed it is it was like you would see 100 alliance people hovering up in the sky and 100 horde people hovering up in the sky, and then like they'd all be waiting for one person to go down, and then like people would swoop down and kill them and then swoop back up, and it was just like, this doesn't feel like war, this is just ridiculous. So now that we're in the zones and we're actually on the ground, like it's so much better than like yeah. Flying mounts definitely ruined PvP.
Yeah, so World PvP was just flat out dead for multiple expansions, and they, even though, again, I think some of the community aspect of it is severely lacking, it's significantly a step in the right direction. And I mean, that whole community aspect of just about anything, WoW might have just gone past the days when that's a thing. So maybe that's just not even a thing to be thinking about. But yeah, no, nothing bad to say about war mode for sure.
Cool. Yeah, I guess, did you have any other thoughts on the expansion in general?
Yeah, obviously being kind of more into the difficult content, Mythic Plus rating,
Right.
all that jazz. So, the Mythic dungeons are out, just the Mythic 0. You can't do the keystones for them yet. But I do like that part of the expansion where everybody's new, nobody really knows I mean, people will know because they've done them on beta or watching guides or whatever, but people are still kind of figuring the dungeons out. And everybody's also obviously not under geared, but you don't have people just coming in with raid gear, just like sweeping through a dungeon, just not even paying attention to mechanics or anything. The progression of going in normals to heroics to mythics, actually, it felt challenging enough to be engaging. Like there are still bosses when now that I'm like, I'm well geared. I am geared past mythics at this point, or geared as much as I can be from mythics and perfectly ready for raiding. But there are still bosses in the dungeons where, we can't just face roll. We have to
Right.
actually do the mechanics or we die, which is great. So I obviously haven't seen any of the raid yet, haven't seen any of the Mythic Plus, but Mythic Plus last expansion was amazing. Like, it allowed me, as a player who didn't play a lot, to go in and do really hard content and get really good rewards just by being good at the game, not being somebody who just no lifes it and does a lot of grinding. Which I've not liked the grindy parts of the game too much, which is one of the major reasons I kind of have, or one of the major issues I just have with the quests in general, is because most of them are just grind out mobs. So having something where it's not a grind, it's just purely skill based, is amazing. So I'm really looking forward to the Mythic Plus. We'll kind of see. I know they have some changes, new affixes, and it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out, because just the way some of the dungeons are designed look like they could be absolute hell with some of the affixes we saw. There are rooms where there's just like hundreds. I don't know if you've done like Temple of Cithralis.
No, I've only done one dungeon so far.
Oh, right, the one we did. Even in Shrine of the Storm, there's some places where there's just like a bunch of mobs, and you have mobs that like get more powerful if they're close to each other, and mobs that explode when they die, and it just looks like some of the dungeons are going to be absolutely insane. Yeah.
For sure.
So
yeah, and I am more for that. Like, from, I guess, the conversation earlier, people might assume that I don't like difficult content. It is one of those things where, and not even that I'm the grind in some senses. Like I said, I love just leveling, questing, even if it is doing sort of similar stuff over and over. And I know grinding is very intrinsic to just the type of game WoW is, but like, I have no problem with difficulty. Like, I always play single player games on the hardest difficulty that they offer usually. But yeah, for me, it's like, because I'm not in high school anymore. I have a lot of things to do in my life. If I have to play 10 hours a day to be able to even start doing the hardcore raiding, like, that's just obviously something I'm never going to experience. But if I can just jump right into something and have it be soul crushingly difficult, I'm like, okay, I'll give that a try. That sounds fun.
Yeah, that's kind of what you get with the Mythic Plus. Like, there's no, you just jump right into the dungeon, and
I've actually never set foot in a Mythic dungeon because, well, for one thing, it's like, because I am so busy, it's even just having, that's the sort of thing you need to have like a regular group for, and like schedule out times and stuff.
Not even necessarily. Like, that's the one thing that their whole group, cross-realm group finder setup does have going for it, is you don't have to have a regular group. Like last expansion in Legion, the friends who got me back into it quit a month into the expansion and just left me there. And there was one guy in my group of friends who would regularly do them, so it was just me and him, and we fill the rest of our group up with people. There is a little bit of there is a bit of a barrier to entry in that you do have to do just the regular dungeons first, but as soon as Raid Finder comes out, it'll be pretty easy to get the gear that you need to at least start the lower level ones, and then once you start doing, like, that's the cool thing.
Yeah, that was my first. I just assumed, because it is end game stuff, usually for that you do need to do a lot of grind to get the gear, so I just assumed that, but I guess I was mistaken.
It's still, you'll have to put some time investment in, but then if you want to, your gear can kind of, the Mythic Plus dungeons can kind of be their own like self-contained experience where you get good enough gear from each level of Mythic Plus to do the next level of Mythic Plus.
I mean, that is my other problem though, is that, like, again, since I am motivated by story, it's like, the point of Mythic dungeons is that you get gear to do more Mythic dungeons, and they're the same dungeons over and over. Like, yeah, I guess, again, this comes down to a problem of me being a unique player who represents 0% of the demographic, is that, like, if they locked story behind super difficult content, I'd play the super difficult content and experience the story, and I'd love that. But, like, because for the most part, the assumption is people who like story are casual, and people who are hardcore hate story. It's just completely separated.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, I think they do have an issue where, they have potentially up to like 25, maybe it's infinite levels, but realistically, I don't know. At least when I was playing, people were getting up to like Mythic plus 25 or something, and that was
Yeah,
just,
I remember like
that was getting ridiculous.
it was like a news story when someone did a 30 or something.
Yeah. Um, so, they can't, each of those levels, like, it has to be progressively harder and harder to kind of keep the challenge going.
Hmm.
And so, how are they going to create something where they just have more and more and more and more story? It is
No,
definitely
I know.
something, it is purely there just for the challenge of it.
For sure. And again, this is like I
Yeah.
definitely don't represent anyone else who plays Warcraft, so it's more just like
Yeah.
I'm not complaining about this. It is, I guess, something that the reason I love war mode so much is, again, like traditionally PvP has been its own separate thing, and the point of PvP is to do more PvP, and it has nothing to do with story or anything like that. So like war mode, though, they have seamlessly integrated. Like you can be questing and experience the story content, and then also PvP pops up. So like I don't even know if it's a thing they can do or want to do, or anyone besides me wants, but like I like when they integrate disparate things together more seamlessly.
Well, I mean, there are definitely things, I guess they kind of have a problem where I have always felt like they should have some sort of system where you can choose to quest on a harder difficulty and, possibly get more rewards, or maybe just killing mobs, taking longer to kill mobs would, get more experience, so, it kind of even out. But, yeah, I mean, questing is so damn easy that I mean, that's part of the why, if it was repetitive, obviously Mythic Plus are repetitive, and people who, like me, don't have a problem with that because it's challenging. But, since I'm somebody who is able to do Mythic Plus, the only challenge I have from questing is when I just pull a shit ton of mobs and have to, try to survive. And even then, it's more of a matter of, can I just zerg these down before they kill me or not? Have I pulled
definitely
12 mobs too many? And, it just doesn't really feel like I have any sort of challenge. So, when I'm doing something unchallenging that's also grindy, that's where the problem really starts to happen. So, yeah, I think if they had something that was more, even if they just had more, like, even more scenario type thing, like, how they have the class challenge, like the DPS heal and tank challenges that started in Mist of Pandaria, and like the gold level of the challenge, or like the Brawlers Guild, like, those things were hard. Challenges that
I did love the
actually
Brawlers Guild.
difficult. And if they incorporated that, like, obviously they can do PvE, which is single player, which is actually difficult. And if they had a system where you could quest and do that, or even if you could, I do like the thing these days where you can do battlegrounds and level up. You could just run around and collect a shit ton of herbs and level up if you wanted to. There are some people who have done that from 110 to 120. It's just gather herbs. Like, obviously they have problems because you have to do the quest lines, but then you could even pet battle to level up if you wanted to. So especially for alts, like, they do have a great system where if you're making an alt, you could potentially actually do what you really want to do. And if they had more, and it's no problem locking certain things, story behind certain things. Like, I don't really have a problem with having certain parts of the story or certain parts of the game locked behind PvP, for example.
For sure. And yeah.
So more.
I mean, yeah, this is a really interesting conversation, but we've already gone for like an hour, and I do have a ton of other things to say, but then we'll go on for more hours. But I guess, I don't know, I'll try to very quickly say this, is that World of Warcraft, obviously they've always had really big stories, but like I would actually like if they would explore smaller stories more, and not necessarily, like, not every story has to be about killing a god that's trying to destroy the world. And I mean, in these zones they do have that, the little stories where you're just like helping someone whose mead hall is being overrun by bees. But it's like the problem, whenever people complain about locking stories behind difficult things, is like they'll do it with a big story. Like I remember last time I didn't see part of Illidan's story because the story of Illidan coming back was locked behind mythic dungeons, which I didn't do. But it could be like, and obviously, like, if they locked story behind pet battles and it was part of the main story, people who have never pet battled would be like, wait, what? I don't get to know what's going on with, like, the Alliance versus the Horde behind. And obviously it would be ridiculous to lock that story behind pet battles anyway. But like, they have so many small stories and so many little cultures in the game. What if they had just like, I don't know. So you go to Zoltazar and there's just like small village of trolls that, like, their whole story is that they raise raptors for combat. And there's this whole pet battle story that, like, has nothing to do with the main story of the Alliance versus the Horde, but it's just this really interesting story that you progress through by pet battling, and I'd be all for stuff like that, and just like these various little stories you can advance by doing PvP or pet battling or even professions. I mean, they have gotten way better with profession story, but anyway, yeah, we have gone on for a while on this. Did you have like any final thoughts on?
No, I don't think there. At this point, you know, we're just kind of speculating on what Blizzard could do or should do. So, yeah, overall, like I'm critical of anything I do. So, you know, I've had a lot of critique. I am obviously enjoying the game, or else I just wouldn't be playing it. So
I am loving this expansion.
Yeah.
I guess maybe a final question. So you're on board with the Horde versus Alliance conflict?
Yeah.
More or less? Because that is the big controversy leading into this expansion is like, I think it's maybe not in the majority of the player base, but the vocal majority.
Yeah, I mean, we did. Yeah,
base.
we talked about that like a couple. I think that was like the first episode we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, we don't have to rehash it, but I guess just so far we're still on board and not part of the vocal majority that seems to hate everything Blizzard does with the story lately. So
yeah, I think it's just fine.
Awesome. So next we are moving